Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Hi there, I'm Luke Hector and this is the Broken Meeple show where I devote my time to ranting and raving about board games, but usually more the latter part. Not a game I was expecting to review, but this one was just kind of kind of on a whim really. I had some spare credit to spend and I figured, you know what, let's have a look on Kender's website, let's just see what's there. What have I not played? What have I not played and felt like seeing? And this one popped up on the feed as a recent release, around the sort of 50 quid mark, you know, for its base set, which is not the cheapest game in the world, but Restoration Games have had a habit of taking some pretty interesting older games and sort of blinging them up and bringing them to a new audience, but also because at the Southampton Game Club I go to, this has actually been quite a popular game played. There's somebody who brings it along usually gets people involved in like Kickstarter add-ons and 5 players and stuff, and when I see it played I'm like, looks like a bit of fun, looks like a bit of fun. I'm into racing games, so, a bit of shooting each other, a little bit of interactivity in that. I'm totally down for it, providing it's, quick and fast and intense, that kind of thing. So I figured, you know what, let's just grab the core set and see what it's like. So I'm just basically doing a speed review of the core set only of Thunder Road Vendetta. I know there are various Kickstarter expansions that are being brought to retail, like a Chop Shop, a 5th player, Carnival of Chaos and all that lot.
It is just that the luxury edition has so much more eagle.
I'm just going from the core set alone. So was this a worthy purchase, or was I just seeing something that wasn't there? Thunder Road takes its influence from stuff like the Mad Max movies, Death Race, that weird, what was it called, the scrap metal or heavy metal one on series on Peacock, the one that's not very good, I forget its name, but stuff like that. Everybody is taking control of 3 separate vehicles, a little Doom buggy, a little medium Avenger, and a big sort of hardy truck, and they are racing them across these different tiles. They've got surfaces like, road surface, sand, mud, impassable mountains, etc. And the idea is that it's pretty much a simple case of get one of your vehicles to the finish line before everyone else does. But of course, everybody else ain't gonna let you do that easily. You've only got so much, freedom of movement with the dice that you roll, but then you've also got everybody with guns on their cars trying to shoot you down at a moment's notice, and you've got to put up with various hazards along the road, which are all these tiles put on these red triangles here. That can potentially be safe, but they could be more mud pits, they could make you skid off into mountains and die, there could be landmines, it's basically a wacky type of game, this is not meant to be taken seriously, it's light, it's just chaotic, roll with it, basically. The idea is that each round, players will roll their 4 movement dice, and that is the worst roll I can think of there, 2s and 1s, but we'll get onto that a bit later. Let's just augment those a bit. And the idea is that on your turn, you will assign one of your die to one of your vehicles, and that is the movement it will have for the turn. On the side, you can also, I didn't get one out, I really should. Here we go. You also have a command board where you can assign 1 die around depending on its value and do some other cool thing, like speed up your car with nitro, repair your car, or bring in a little chopper, which is this cool little sort of mini with like rotary blades on that basically lands on the track, can shoot other cars, but also is a death sentence for anybody stupid enough to go fly underneath it. And essentially, you move your cars along this track, basically always in their forward arc, and you try to race each other along. You've got different routes that you can take, and it's up to you whether you want to go over hazards or not. But eventually, when you've got, anywhere between 9 to 12, or with the expansion, like 15 cars on the track, you're going to hit each other a lot. Well, that's fine, because the idea is you do what's called a slam. Your car, let's take this big one here, it effectively stacks on top of the other car. You roll 2 dice, a direction die and a slam die. It basically just tells you which direction a vehicle goes and whether it's the top or the bottom vehicle. So typically you'll have an advantage if you're the one doing the slamming, and you'll even have a bigger advantage if yours is the bigger vehicle. So what you're essentially trying to do is shunt people out of the way, so you can get past, or better still, careen them off into a mountain so they can, roll, fly off to the right and explode, if anybody's an Angry Joe fan.
Fly off to the right and explode!
Alternatively, if you can't slam them, you'll shoot them instead. So if you can get up behind them on the track, then you're able to shoot them. This is simply rolling a die, and it's got faces based on the size of the vehicle you're hitting. It is easier to hit a large truck than it is to hit a small little Doom buggy. Makes sense. And that's essentially a typical round. You will use up your dice, and then once that's done, refresh all the dice, and keep going. You have, at the start, 3 of these tiles together in a sort of jigsaw, basically, just to lay out the track, and there's an A and B side for each. Once you get to the 3rd one, it moves like a bit of a conveyor belt. So the one at the back comes off entirely, this all moves back, and a new one comes on to replace it at the front. If the race goes on normally, then it will basically be 5 tiles and then there's a finish line. But if one player has all their cars knocked out or not working before that happens, then the current tile becomes the finish line. Yes, your cars can get knocked out. I mean, they're getting shot up, they can be slammed off the road, sometimes they're going to be busted and not working, and not all of them can be repaired. So it does mean that you're not like out of the game forever if it does happen. But once the finish line appears, first car to get there wins. Nice and simple. You've got the gist of pretty much the main stuff of the game. The hazard tiles can be, as I said, landmines, other wreckage, you know, or just more mud pits. And when you take damage, it might just be a dent, or it could be shrapnel that flies off and hits another car, or my favourite, blast off, which has the car literally fly off into, well, off to the right and explode, I guess, you know, if we're carrying on with that joke. And that's kind of the gist. There's not much more to say, really.
I live, I die, I live again!
So yeah, from that overview, you can get the idea of what this game is like. And I had a lot of warnings before I jumped into it, as if it wasn't painfully clear from the box, really. But, you know, this is not a game you take seriously. If you go into this expecting some typical Euro racer, something like Thunder Alley, for example, or anything like that, or even like some of the lighter racers like Downforce even, you know, then you're not going to be impressed. This is meant to be an in-your-face, chaotic racer. You have fun with it. You get into the theme. You make Mad Max references everywhere. I really have not watched any of those movies in a long time. But the idea is that you're just meant to go in here and have a good time. You're not meant to, like, you know, you're not going for victory points. You're not meant to be strategic in how you run, because, let's face it, any strategy you come up with is going to be undone in the first 10 seconds. It's just meant to be, here's a bunch of cool cars, race them on the track and shoot each other. What more do you expect? Now, this does make the game a little bit on the group dependent side, because if you just take this to a convention and play it with randoms, I don't think you get anywhere near the same amount of fun as if you play it with people you know. And, you know, I have played this in both circumstances. I didn't take it to a convention, but I did introduce people I'd never met to it. And it was fine, it was a fun game, but it just lost a little bit of that edge, you know, compared to playing it with, you know, people that I play at, you know, often with at the club, or people who are into these sort of things, where we're laughing our heads off, we're just like, we don't care that one person's wing mirror flew off, snipered some other vehicle, which then flew off and snipered some other vehicle. You know, it's hilarious when it happens, and it's just a good amount of fun. But you need the right sort of people. It's got that sort of cosmic encounter style vibe to it, where, you know, you take it too seriously, you won't enjoy it anywhere near as much. So, is the game just flat out enjoyable? Well, yes, it is pretty enjoyable. I mean, it is fun, you know, doing racing games in general. The dice mechanic is very simple, and, you know, shooting and slamming each other's cars is great fun. I mean, you're almost doing it, well, actually, no, almost, you are doing it on purpose a lot of the times. It's like, you know, I could go around you, but you know what? Poof, you know, let's crash into you and see what happens. You know, it can lead to a lot of cool situations like that. Now, there are a couple of negatives that do have to be said, though. And this, I know that the game is, as I said, don't be taken seriously, you can't plan for stuff and everything, but the dice. Yes, it's a dice game. There's going to be randomness, there's going to be luck involved. That's fine, it's a 1 hour, 1 hour and a quarter tops, you know, racing game with frantic shooting. Yes, it's short, and it's fine. It's fine to have a bit of randomness in it, because it's meant to be a stupid in-your-face game. But I do wish that the dice were a little bit more balanced as to how useful they were, because you roll these and this sets your movement value. It is always better to have high numbers than low numbers when it comes to movement. But the problem is that you've got this command board that has specific values for some of the other things. Like, you need a 6 to repair, 1 to 3 is a nitro, 3 to 5 is drift, which is ignore damage on the first slam or something. And any allows you to do your little airstrike thing. So it's good that any number will let you do the airstrike. But that's basically just to land it and take a shot and hope it hits. You know, it may not do anything. But the problem is that it means that if you roll these dice on a consistent basis and get high numbers, you're going to be doing infinitely better than anybody else who's rolling lower, because there isn't enough of a balancing aspect for rolling low numbers. Yeah, you could put them on the nitro and you'll get that value in extra movement, but it also means that a 3 is infinitely better than a 1 and 2, because it has the same effect, except you get +3 instead of +1 or 2. And 3 can still be used for the drift action, which is normally a 3 to 5. So basically, you are hoping that you constantly roll 6s. You're perfectly fine with 5 to 6s. At the very lowest, you want to roll 3s, and if anything, 3 is probably better than 4 because you can't nitro with a 4, but you can with a 3. 2s and 1s just become next to useless, really. They don't feel like they do anything. No, you might think, well, alright, I'll stick it on the airstrike, but I can't airstrike every round. I only get to do it once a round, and there's other actions I may need to do. What would have been good in the rules, and I think I am house ruling this going forward, is if you roll a certain total less than or equal to, let's say, 10, you're allowed to re-roll all your dice. Because it honestly, I've seen it happen in the games. I know it's meant to be a luck fest, but it's not fun for the person who just has bad die luck and constantly rolls low numbers compared to somebody else who gets the high numbers. You know, that person's already on like the 3rd tile and they're barely getting off the 1st tile because they can roll 6s and you can only roll 1s and 2s. It's not entirely fair, and it's not entirely fun for that person. Yes, I know, lucky game, short, but I'm going to put that house rule in and just say, look, if you roll a stupidly low amount total-wise, you can have a re-roll, at least to try and balance the books a little bit. On top of that, you do have the luck factor, obviously, of damage going haywire and stuff, but that's fine. That's in the wackiness of the game, you know. I've had times where I've slammed into a car with like a 1 in 24, 36 chance or whatever of getting shunted into my own chopper and dying instantly. So what happens? Exactly that. You know, that sort of stuff happens and I don't mind. But just, yeah, maybe balancing the dice attributes a little bit would have been a tiny bit better. You can get a bit of a small runaway leader issue, like if somebody has like a really good early run, gets miles out in front and everyone is still hanging at the back, you probably realise, yeah, you know what, that person has a pretty good chance of winning unless people get very liberal with their airstrikes and can shoot. But then there's no guarantee that your airstrike will actually shoot them because you might just roll unlucky on the die, especially if it's their small car in front, which means that it's not impossible to hit the small car most of the time anyway. The variety in this game for the cost is fine. It could be better. You know, the hazard tiles are fairly standard. I mean, the wrecks and the landmines are good fun, but the rest of them are just terrain pieces. They're not that interesting. The damage tiles I quite like. I like the idea that it could be a den, but it could also blast them off into some other distance. 5 double-sided road tiles lends a little bit of, you know, kind of flexibility to how the track will look, but because they're numbered, you end up with kind of a similar start and kind of a similar end for the most part, and some of the layouts aren't as interesting as others, so most of the time you want to use the B sides always for this. The only other bit of variety you get is a bunch of cards, and these cards are basically additional rule sets that you can throw into the game, but some again are better than others. You've got road conditions to say that a particular tile has some weird effect. This is really cool. I throw this in every time because it's just a good laugh to make something even more weird. But you've got bonus commands, which gives you like an alternative command action to use. These are cool. They are not balanced though, and they are definitely not balanced. There are some that are way better than others. You've got one-shots, which is basically a one-shot card you keep hidden until you need it. You know, again, they're quite situational in certain cases, and some are just easily a little bit better than others. Advanced airstrikes, which gives your airstrike chopper something more interesting to do when it lands. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's something a little bit different. These ones are probably a little bit more balanced, I think, than others. Or again, one or two of them are a little situational. And then you've got probably one of the better ones, I think, in here, the bounties, which is basically like an objective that you have. And if you can perform this particular stunt, you get a bonus as a one-shot during a game. These are pretty neat, but I only throw these in usually with people who have played the game once. I'm not a huge fan of throwing in the, you know, the one-shots and the bonus commands because I just don't think they're balanced enough. So really, most of the time I'm just using, you know, maybe the bounties and almost certainly the road conditions. These add, like I say, a tiny bit of variance and a little bit of variety to the game, but it's still going to have a little bit of a replay value issue where there's only so much to make each game feel unique. It's definitely going to feel a little bit rinse-repeat over multiple games unless you're playing it with different people who have different ways of trying to race, whether they're very much more aggressive or not. So you could add to that variety with some of the expansions. You know, you've got Chop Shop and Carnival of Chaos and a couple of others, but they cost a fair bit of money and they're not as easy to get hold of. So you could end up, you know, taking your £50 pretty much core set and then suddenly turning it into like £150 just by adding a few extra rules, some more road tiles, and, you know, maybe, you know, some extra variants here and there, but that's a lot of money to spend on a game which is basically just a get some cars, run them, and shoot each other to hell and back. You know, it just feels like the value's gone out of the window at that point by the time you're buying all of that. The core set alone is fine, but at that price point it would have been nice for just a little bit extra to have been thrown in the box. But overall, the game is a good laugh. It is a good amount of fun. You just need to know going in that this is definitely a turn your brain off, race some cars, shoot each other, and have a bit of a laugh. It goes from 2 to 4 players. I don't recommend this with 2. It just, you know, the place would just feel a bit empty unless you're going to control 2 colors each, which you could do. You know, that might work. But really, you're looking at 3 and preferably 4. In fact, there's a 5th player expansion. This is one of those times where I think having the 4th player and maybe even the 5th player expansion is worth it. Yes, it's going to add more time to the game because more people are taking turns, but that much extra chaos on the road just adds to the fun. It adds to the zaniness of what it is you're doing. 3 of you will get into some clashes and it will go at a very quick pace, but there's only so much interaction you'll get with 3. So most of the time you want to bring this core set out with 4 and have a good laugh with 12 cars on the field, 4 airstrikes, and just going nuts with each other. You know, that does work quite well. So it's a fine game. You know, I like it. I do get some good laughs, but I've got to play it with the right people and I've got to be kind of in the mood for it. So it is a pretty solid game and one that I'll probably hang on to because it does fill a bit of a niche, because my other racing games vary from sort of like a betting racing game to a more heavy-duty racing game. You know, there's not that many zany racing games that I own as far as I'm aware. So, you know, this one will probably sit in the collection and do well. But in terms of its rating, I'm thinking kind of a... it's hard to say. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10, a great game, on the proviso you play it with people you know and can turn your brain off. Like you gotta take it, you can't take it seriously, you gotta play it with the right people. It leads to some good 8 out of 10 experiences. I think the flaws with this game, particularly the house ruling that I'm having to do with these dice, do take it away from being a distinction level though. You know, there are a few issues that for that price point could have been resolved. You know, particularly if you're going to bring it back and make it better from the modern age. I mean, it would have been a simple rule to have noticed this, and it shouldn't have taken much playtesting to have spotted that low values on dice are nowhere near as good as high ones just by default. There's no way to mitigate it, so you're kind of stuffed if you're in that position. Yeah, but it's definitely like on a 7 out of 10 level if you're just taking it to play with random people you've never met, because I think you need that little meta and that sort of camaraderie with everyone you know to get the full enjoyment out of this. So you're looking on the 7 to 8 mark. For me, probably an 8, because I'm more than likely going to bring this out with people at the clubs that I know and that. I'm not going to just bring it out for total strangers, you know, unless it's... You know, I don't know, unless they're new to the club and they're used to gateway games. But even then, I can think of games that I might bring out first. Before then, even 1 or 2 other racing games in that matter. So it does the job. I don't think it's the best thing since sliced bread, like some people have been saying. It's definitely got some issues, but I enjoy it. It ticks a box, it fills a little niche, and it does fine for what it does, even if the price point could have been a little bit lower, or maybe just a little bit extra thrown in the box for that money. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb up on YouTube and thumb up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Check out the rest of my content I've been doing. Plenty of reviews have been coming out, as well as the big, like, top, well, not top even, just the 25 list of solo games that I tend to play. No solo mode in this one, so don't even try it. And of course, let me know your comments below. Is this a game that you absolutely adore, or have you played it and hate its guts? I can totally see why you would hate its guts. It really does depend what kind of games you're into and what kind of racing games you're into as to whether this one's going to give you that, you know, fun factor or not. So until next time, remember, regardless of whether it's a lovely day for you or not, it's still only a game. So bye for now.